Hello and welcome to Your Coaching Journey, a podcast for doctors about coaching. Whether you're a coaching doctor, a doctor who is learning to coach, or a doctor who'd like to build coaching into your professional life, then this is the podcast for you.
Hi, I'm Helen Leathers, and with me today is my co-host and business partner, Tom Dillon. Good morning, Tom. How are you?
I'm wonderfully well, thank you, Helen. How are you?
Excellent. I'm very good, thank you. And what are we talking about today on our episode?
Today we are asking the question, do we have to have goals in coaching?
Oh, what a lovely question.
Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Well, interesting, because I don't think we do.
Okay, good.
If you think about goals as a very, I want to get here and how we're going to do it, and you know, when are you going to do it by? That kind of, I think we've talked about it before, almost like a transactional coaching. We don't coach like that.
It could be quite a dull episode because I think I'm in agreement. So,
okay. And we're done.
There's not going to be much debate, I don't think. Although there's plenty to talk about, though. So let's get going. So I think it's a good question to ask because I think for most people coming to coaching and thinking of getting involved in coaching as a profession, they probably have that idea that goals is very much an integral part of coaching. So I think it's useful to explore it.
Absolutely. And I think that was my first experience really of coaching, was that it was all about what do you want to achieve? And it was actually the reason that I never wanted to be a coach. Yeah. Because I didn't like that way of coaching.
Yeah, and it probably puts some people off coming to coaching because of that. And obviously, when you're teaching people how to coach, when you're training people, you've got to start somewhere. So I don't think it's a bad place to start. But obviously, in terms of our coaching and the way that we train people, we're more interested in transformational change, which is not about aiming for specific goals. So we will work with goals if that's what the client wishes to do, but I don't think it's necessary for them to be there. And I think some of it is terminology. So obviously, we will have desired objectives for our coachees. We will work with their desired objectives. We'll be looking for those. We'll be looking for the change they want to see. And you might refer to that as a goal. But I prefer not to use the word.
Yes, I'm the same. And I think it's useful for us as coaches to know how to help someone break down goals and work towards them if that's what they want to do. That has to be within our skill set, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm just thinking as we're talking and thinking about our listeners, and if there's anyone listening that's going to commission someone to do some coaching, they might want a goal to be set for the person that's being coached. So we might be alienating a few people that might want to employ us as coaches by talking about not using goals. Just a thought.
It is, but like I say, we can do goals, but I don't think goals are the be-all and end-all. I think there's so much more that goes on in someone's mind, in someone's thinking, and there are so many other challenges in the world and in people's lives that if they think a coach is all about goals, then they're not really understanding coaching. And if they're looking to have a space to think, they need to know that it's not all about goals.
Yeah, absolutely. I think organisations are where goals tend to come up for people in coaching. And if we track that back historically, I think coaching exists because of the business, the commercial aspect of it. So if we go back to middle of the last century, post-war, then there was lots of new consultancy companies coming in to tell people how to do things better, more efficient ways of doing things. So consultants were very much part and parcel of commercial life, and obviously from that stems business advisors, and from that we have coaches. So I think going back to that sort of time, people would have been looking for a coach to help with the performance of individuals within their business. And if we think about probably the figurehead of coaching in the last century was John Whitmore, who wrote a book, Coaching for Performance, but he was heavily involved in introducing coaching, certainly within the UK and also in America. And he brought in aspects of sport into coaching, but also that business management consultancy side of things, and kind of merged the two. And so, and he had the GROW model, which is, you know, we used to train the GROW model. We found a better model now. We've created our own model, but the GROW model is about what's the goal,
Yep.
What's your current reality? What options have you got to move forward? And how will you do it? What's the way forward? So that grow model is very much the starting point for most people when they come to coaching. And obviously goals is at the forefront of that. It's the main thing that people are working towards. So that's, I think when people think about John Whitmore and coaching for performance, they think of grow and they think of goals. But actually, if you go back to that book and you go to the end of the book, John Whitmore actually moves past that and he actually starts to talk about transformational coaching. And I think most people never get that far through the books. They're not aware that he actually had a different way of being. And he started to talk about identity, spirituality, subpersonalities, inner wisdom, personal growth. So completely moved away from the grow model and that pursuit of goals.
That's interesting.
But as I say, it doesn't really get talked about. But he was very much concerned and I guess that for him was a development of his own coaching and what he was interested in pursuing. And I think that's perhaps an evolution for most people. When they come to coaching, they're very much involved in that basic transactional, what's the goal, how do we get you there? But as you start to develop as a coach, it becomes more nuanced. And as you say, we start to work with the person in front of us and all of the complexity that they bring to coaching.
And it's interesting that if we compare grow, which the first letter, like you say, is goal, with the model that we use, Tom's Code, we've got the T for topic, which is much broader. And then we have the O for the outcome. What do you want to have by the end of this session? And so you can see already that it's much broader. And then as we go through that model, much more nuanced than just what's your goal, what do you want to achieve?
Yeah, quite often in those conversations around what's the topic of conversation for today and what do you want to have by the end of this session, what they want to have by the end might just be clarity. So you could say, well, that's the goal.
Yes,
if someone was
absolutely.
arguing for the use of the term goals, you could say, well, that's the goal for today. It's to have some clarity. But I don't really like that word as a guide. It feels like we're pushing someone to get somewhere fast.
Yes.
And actually within our coaching, we like to have lots of lovely space for people to think and generate new thinking. So I think it's an unhelpful phrase in that respect.
So with coaching and most coaching approaches, we're future focused. And it does make sense to have an idea of where you're heading. And for some people, it will make sense to have a specific goal if that's what they want.
Yeah, but I think people that come with a specific goal tend to not generate lots of new thinking, which makes it difficult, doesn't it? We are interested in someone coming and doing some really good thinking. So if they just come and say, right, I've got this goal, I need to know how to get there, we're off and running and without stopping and pausing and checking. We've talked before on the podcast about the ecology of the desired outcome. So if someone says, right, I want to do this by then, maybe they haven't stopped to think about what impact that's going to have on their family, on the people around them. So I think there is some more thinking to be done before we head off in the pursuit of goal. And if we go to that place too quickly, so come in, someone says, right, I've got this goal. Okay, what options have you got? How are you going to get there? It's too fast. And we need to slow it down and get people to really think about the direction they're heading in and what they really want in life. And I think that's evidenced in neuroscience. So there's very limited neuroscience in coaching, but the only study that I've come across where neuroscience fMRI scanning has been used is a small study where they looked at how people are coached and whether they focus on that goal straight away or whether they actually do some visioning and think about how they want their life to be in the future, which is more useful in generating new thinking. And it's definitely that stopping, pausing, visioning that future self helps people to slow down and engage the parts of the brain that are going to be more creative and more reflective.
I like that. That backs up a lot of what I do. So it's always nice to have some scientific backup. But because I love to use visualization and that meditative process to tap into what's really within you, where your heart wants to take you, as I put it, it's nice to know that that's the most effective way to do it. And we can do the thinking and the analysis and the breaking down of how to achieve that later, once we've really connected with that vision.
Yeah, and within that vision, there may be goals, specific goals that people have, but I find that people don't really need too much help when they've got a specific goal.
No.
They're up and running anyway. They don't really need a coach. So I think it's more about why, what sits behind it, what's the purpose, what it's going to give them at the end of it. To stop and do that thinking, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I recall working with a lady where I asked her to draw how she'd like her future to be. We'd got to the end of the coaching session, so I asked her to do that as a bit of homework. And she came back 2 weeks later, and I was expecting her to present me with this drawing, which she did. And she said, I've also done one of how it looks now. And I realised that I didn't really want to be here. So I have applied for a job, been interviewed, handed my notice in, and I start in my new role. That's going to lead me towards this future vision in a couple of weeks' time. And it's like, wow, how fast did that happen? All I asked her to do was draw me a picture. But she didn't draw me a picture, did she? She drew her a picture.
Yeah. And drew herself in the picture.
Yeah. And then really grabbed hold of that and went, I don't want to be here. And affected that change so quickly. I was astounded, really.
Yeah, so on our course, we're very much concerned about that transformational change. So looking at the future, getting people to really generate some new thinking about the future and not going to that place of goals too quickly and just being focused on, okay, how are we going to get there as quickly as possible? So I think, as we were saying earlier, if we've got organisations that are interested in someone just performing more effectively and being who they want them to be, so asking the coach to be different to how they're being, I think you are going to get involved with goals, but I don't think it's always helpful. When we take a very holistic view to the person sitting in front of us, and quite often what the individual brings to coaching is not what their sponsoring organisation thought they were going to bring to coaching. So we're not doing coaching to them, we're sitting with them, exploring their world for them, and quite often what comes up for them in their coaching is very different to what the organisation thought it was going to be. And that's the fascinating part of coaching.
Yeah.
But I think if we can work with the individual and who they are, then I think that leads to much better outcomes for everyone.
And it also links in with that Gestalt approach that we spoke about previously, that change happens when you become who you truly are.
Yeah, and I think if we go off in pursuit of goals, we don't have the time to sit in a Gestalt way and be aware of who we are and how we are in the moment and what's going on for us as a complete human individual. We're just off running, aren't we? And we're not actually doing that reflection that's really powerful in coaching. And coaching provides such a perfect space to do that reflection and really get underneath why we want to do what we want to do.
And I think also that idea that coaching is a space to be heard and also to hear your own thinking. And that's not about goals either, is it?
No, and we participate in, when we're on our coaching programs, we participate with our students, and so we are coached. And I love that space. So it's quite often 20 minutes of someone asking me. They'll quite often say, "Well, what is it you want to talk about today?" And I think, hang on, give me 20 seconds, and something will come to mind. It's always something useful. It's always something real that's going on for me at the time. And they will ask me that question, what would you like to have by the end of this session? And I say, well, probably, I just want to do some thinking in this 20 minutes. And it's always a really useful space. And I just think, and I talk. I'm an extrovert, so I tend to talk as I think. And it all pours out. And I make sense of it. And sometimes at the end, they'll go, I'm not sure how well that coaching session went. I'm not sure about. And I said, no, that was really useful space for me to say out loud what I wanted to say and for me to recognise what's going on for me and do that new thinking. There are things in there that I hadn't thought before I just said them out loud. So you're absolutely right that having that space just to open up and talk can be really useful. Otherwise, coaching wouldn't exist. We'd just be able to do that ruminating in our head and we'd sort it out in our head. But quite often we can't do that. We have to say it out loud.
And it strikes me as well that if we take out the requirement of a goal and an action plan, then we remove the need for the potential for new coaches to think they have to fix and bring the solution. because that is a challenge for a lot of new coaches, especially our doctors. They're used to fixing people, which we love them for. We don't want them to be any other way when they're a doctor. But when they come into that coaching space initially, one of the hardest things to unlearn is that need to fix and solve a problem. Yeah. And if we remove that requirement for a goal and think about it as a thinking space, then hopefully it helps them to take themselves and their problem solving out of the equation.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think when someone comes to a coaching session, and quite often I'm coaching people over a period of time, when people come and they haven't got something immediate on their mind and they go, oh, right, I need to do this by next Friday, I'm really pleased that we then have that space to talk about them and who they are and who they want to be and where life is taking them, rather than the operational stuff that is useful to talk about sometimes, but not always terribly interesting. So I think I like to take those conversations deeper. And when people don't have a specific goal, then it's much easier to do that. So if we go back to our original question was, do we need to have a goal in coaching? I don't think so. I think coaching is much more interesting than that. And I think if people are put off coming to coaching because they don't have a specific goal, then I would reassure them that that's not necessary. That desired objectives will come up in coaching as you start to sort out what's going on for you and what you want for your future. Things will emerge. And I think, it's an interesting space.
And I think if someone does have a goal that they want to bring to coaching, bring it, but then be prepared for your own evolution in the same way that we said coaches evolve as they move away from being goal focused. Our coachees evolve as we open up that conversation. So they might come initially with a goal and say, this is what I want to achieve, but then be interested, be curious, sit with the thinking and see where that takes you, because, I mean, that could be life-changing, couldn't it?
Yeah. And also just to check in with them about the why. What's the reason for you wanting this goal? And quite often it's because someone else wants it.
Yes.
Whether it's their organisation or another member of their family.
Or they feel they should.
Yeah. Historical stuff. That their parents have an expectation that they will work towards that goal. So I think just checking in with what's important in this can really help explore it. So, what goals may well exist and they might be there at the beginning, but I think if we move too quickly to try and get them to their goal, we might feel we've done great work as a coach because they've achieved their goal. But was it the right goal, and was it right to push straight away to get to that goal?
When there's so much more that could be talked through.
Yeah. Good. Well done, Helen. That's really interesting conversation about goals.
Yes, and I love it. I think that it just changes how people think about the coaching space.
Yeah, so for anyone out there who is concerned when someone comes to a coaching session and they've not got a goal in mind straight away, don't worry too much about that. Be ready to sit with them in curiosity and just explore what's going on in their life and that future vision for themselves. And some goals will emerge somewhere along the line. But there'll be more interesting goals.
And hopefully we've reassured someone who is thinking, do I want coaching? That it isn't all about the goals. And just think about it, that someone is going to sit with you for a specific amount of time and listen and allow you to think and talk through your thoughts. And hopefully that will encourage some people to come to coaching who perhaps haven't been before.
Lovely. Thank you, Helen. Next time on the podcast, we will be exploring a new coaching approach, or another coaching approach, which is neuroscience in coaching.
Oh, fascinating.
It's a really interesting topic, so I'm looking forward to that. So we will see you next time.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.